So the realization of contentment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through acceptance of what is given and turning over the management of one's affairs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we talked a little about qana'ah, we talked a little about tafweed, and tafweed is an interesting term because you also find that same term in aqidah. When you talk about the meaning of some of the verses in the Quran where they seemingly denote that Allah has anthropomorphical or corporeal attributes that are not that do not befit Him, that are not appropriate for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's two main schools of thought dealing with those verses, namely madhab al-tafweed, as they say, the school of tafweed, which is to say, as has been narrated on Imam Malik and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and many of the other mujtahid imams, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the true meaning of such verses like Ar-Rahman al-Arsh istawa, Yadullahi fawqa aydihim, verses like these, and that He knows the true meaning of those verses. And there's the famous incident with Imam Malik radiallahu anhu, where a man came and asked about that specific verse, Ar-Rahman al-Arsh istawa, and he stated back to him that the istiwa is ma'loom, right? Wal kayf, two different versions. One of them says wal kayf majhul aw ghayru ma'qul. La adri ayyuhuma asah, but that's the two versions that I'm aware of. So he said that the istiwa ma'loom is known. Lughatan is what is meant, is what our scholars tell us. That in terms of the language, what does istiwa mean? Right, to be established on something or to be sitting on something. That's known in the language. Linguistically, we know what that means. Well, kayf, right, how does it apply in the verse here? Imma majhul, unknown, aw ghayru ma'qul, and they're very similar in meaning. Majhul means that you can't know it, because if we try to apply the linguistic meaning as is in the verse, it's impossible. Remember what Dr. Sidi Umar said about mustahil. Remember how we think about aqidah and qism al-mustahil, wal-jaiz, wal-wajib, right? Those are the three categories. So it is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have any of the attributes of His creation. So that means anything that's temporal, anything that denotes space or time, impossible. Again, based upon pure reason, as Sidi mentioned before. Can't be, it's out of the question. Because Allah transcends the space and the time, right? As the ulama say, كَانَ اللَّهُ وَلَا شَيْءَ مَعَهُ وَهُوَ الْآنِ عَلَى مَا عَلَيْهِ كَانَ. Allah was, and this is based on a hadith in Ibn Majah, I believe. Allah was, كَانَ Allah, was. Here, كَانَ التَّامَّة, right? Usually كَانَ has ism كَانَ and khabar كَانَ. Like you say, He was something. But here we're just talking about just He was, and that's it. Allah was, وَلَا شَيْءَ مَعَهُ, and there was nothing with Him. وَهُوَ الْآنِ, and now, and even really al-an, the now thing doesn't apply, but the now is from our perspective, right? Because now and then and so forth doesn't apply with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَهُوَ الْآنِ عَلَى مَا عَلَيْهِ كَانَ, and now, for our perspective, He is as He was, right? And that's sifat al-hawadith, things that are changing or are created. One of the attributes is that they're changing. Beginning, end, change, decay, so forth. And that's all mushahad. You can witness all of that, right? When we reflect upon the creation, we see that cycle of life, the things being born, then growing up, then decaying, then dissipating, then coming back over and over and over again. So Allah He's actually showing us how the ba'tha would be, how the resurrection would be. If we see things resurrected from the winter when everything dies, and then the beginning of the spring when things begin to sprout, and then they're full bloom, late spring, early summer, and then in the autumn when they begin to decay once again. And this is constantly seen. Think about that, the 4 seasons, or at least in countries that have the 4 seasons. I guess the other countries have 2 seasons, the rainy season and the dry season. But even then, there is a life and a growth and a decay. So it's kind of training us, it's giving us signs by which we can discern that all of this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if He can bring back life from underneath the ground, then why couldn't He do the same with us? When we're put into the ground, eventually all of us will be, and then He will resurrect us once again on that Yawm al-Qiyamah, the day of resurrection. So tafweed, in that context, means to put all of your trust and reliance on the meaning with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And actually, I think modern man has quite a difficulty with that concept, tafweed, right? If you look at the modern perspective on knowledge and science and knowing things, it's generally so that you can manipulate what you know in order to do what's possible, whatever you think you can do. And usually the ethical questions, so to speak, come afterwards, right? They started cloning sheep and no one really talked about, should we be doing this or not? The idea was, well, if we can do it, if it's in the realm of possibility and we're able to do it, then let's do it. So there was no sort of taking a precautious step and saying, let's slow down here and think about whether we should be delving into this, right? The Manhattan Project, if we can make such a weapon, right, and it's doable, why not? And so they went into it. So they weren't being driven by a moral compass. That was not even into the equation. And so there wasn't a concept of tafweed, right? Fawwid, yani, in other words, saying, I admit to not knowing something, and I admit I may never have knowledge of this thing, but nevertheless, I acquiesce to it, I accept it. And that's, I think, a very difficult principle for many modern people to imbibe, to embody. Because you always, the modern world is telling you that you have to know it, you have to manipulate it, you have to put it at your disposal, you have to make it to use, and if you can't, then it's worthless. And you find this, with many people who call themselves scientists and astronomers and, even to mention the divine and God in that particular context, it's like heresy for them, right? How is it that you're a scientist at the same time you kind of believe in God and you don't believe in evolution as we talk about it and so forth? So, tafweed means, ufawwid, that here's a certain point, I cannot understand it. There are things I will not understand, I will not know. And we have verses like this in the Quran. I mentioned some of them. Also the beginning verses of some of the surah, the huruf, as they say, like Alif Lam Mim Dhalika al-Kitab la rayba fi hudan lil-muttaqin, the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Ali Imran, Alif Lam Mim also, Surah Maryam, Kaf Ha Ayn Mim Saad. These letters, or huruf al-muqatta'a, they say, have a secret about them. Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, it's narrated that he said, every book, every revealed book has secrets. And the secrets of this revealed book are those letters at the beginning. And if you look at the letters, there are 14 of them, which is half of the Arabic alphabet. And if you look at the attributes of the letters and the makharij, those of you who studied tajweed, you'll also find that exactly half of them are represented, in terms of the different sifat, huruf al-hams and huruf al-jahr and things like that, are also equally represented in the letters in the beginning of some of the chapters of the Quran. And that doesn't mean that people haven't tried to interpret the meaning of them. You open up any tafsir of the Quran and it'll tell you, Alif Lam Mim, maybe Alif stands for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the Lam is Jibreel and Mim is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Possibly, but no one can say ala sabil al-qata', right? In other words, to say unequivocally, it means this, or it doesn't mean this. Yasin, a name of the Prophet ﷺ, possibly, but no one can say for sure. Taha, also possible, but no one can say for sure. And so that's an element of tafweed, right? Saying, I relegate and I leave the meaning in the meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended for those verses, and I accept that. So the concept of tafweed in the verses that the verse Imam Malik was asked about is to leave it as is, but at the same time you acknowledge that the what we call in Arabic language al-ma'na al-haqiqi, right, which is the pure linguistic meaning of the word, is inapplicable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It cannot be. And this is where you often hear an issue with some of the other schools of thought that are outside of the Ash'ari and Maturidi purview, and they talk about how, Allah has this attribute, whatever it is, and it's haqiqi, it's real, it's not majaz. In other words, it can't be interpreted to mean something other than the exact linguistic meaning, but at the same time they say it's haqiqi, but we don't know exactly how, right? Because if you affirm the haqiqi meaning, right, if you say yad is al-jariha, so if you say Allah has that thing as an attribute, but we don't know exactly how, then you're saying He has a limb, but we don't know what His limb looks like. That's problematic. You can't say He has a limb to begin with, because that's like the creation, right? Anything that resembles creation, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. So He cannot resemble creation in any manner whatsoever. So when you affirm haqiqi and at the same time you say, وَلَكِنْ نَجْهَلِ الْكَيْفِ, we don't know how, it's a contradiction in terms. And if we have husn al-dhan with them, which I like to have, I would say they don't understand that. They don't really get that. They're not seeing that level in it. And if we say they do understand, then, the ulama talked about al-mujassima, those who pictured Allah to be like a jism or a corporal body, which, that concept of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is obviously antithetical to exactly what Sidi al-Tawar was talking about, and the ulama of the Ash'ari and the Maturidiyya, and the sound belief of the madhab of Ahl Sunnah. So I would avoid those type of polemics. Don't get too much into people with that, especially if all they want to do is debate and argue. Disputation and al-jadal, as they say, it's an afa, it's a blameworthy thing to get engaged in, especially when it's just for the sake of argument. And most people today don't really listen to what you have to say. They're kind of just waiting, and then they just want to respond. And what they wanted to say actually is not going to be affected by what you're saying to them. They're just waiting to respond back to you, and they have it in their head, the whole argument of how they're going to go about doing it. So it's kind of a waste of time if you engage in that with people who just love disputation. But for those who are willing to listen and have some insaf, some objectivity, then this is something that should be made clear. Wallahu a'lam. But back in the context of tafweed here, so tafweed means to leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what's going to help you to be content with Him. So you become pleased with what Allah has pleased for you. And know that there's nothing better than what Allah has designated and what He's pleased about for you yourself. And this is what helps lead to that maqam of rida, as he mentions here. Then the fourth one, I think, وتحقيق الرجوع إلى الله بالحمد والشكر في السراء واللجأ إليه في الضراء, or the last one. So, how does one make a realization of turning to Allah in prosperity and adversity? He says, turning back to Allah is through praise and gratitude in times of prosperity. Bilhamdi wa shukri. And hamd and shukr are very similar in meaning, but they're not interchangeable. And there's actually a difference between the meaning of hamd linguistically speaking and the meaning of hamd in the terminology of the ulama. And if you study the Islamic disciplines, this is something you have to become familiar with. Oftentimes when they begin defining terms, and the definition of terms actually is a pinnacle, it's a key to the opening up of the Islamic disciplines. So if you get mixed up in terms, then you'll be lost from the beginning. Because the ulama have taken the terms, and there's a specific meaning in each discipline to what it means. Like we mentioned before about sunnah, right? Because sunnah has a different meaning or a connotation across the different disciplines. Of course, the discipline of hadith or of usul, fiqh, or fiqh itself, different meanings. So you have to be working with the correct connotation in order to understand what the text is trying to tell you, what the scholar is trying to explain to you. So usually these words will have something called al-ma'na lughatan, linguistically, wal-ma'na istilahan, and in the terminology of the specific discipline that you're studying. And you have similar thing in other languages and other disciplines, even non-Islamic disciplines, not relating to the Islamic disciplines. You have certain terms that carry on a certain meaning. Like when Dr. Omar was talking about accident in the philosophical sense, meaning the thing that we use to translate for arad, the secondary attributes of a jawhar or of an entity. So hamd and shukr are similar, but they say that a shukr specifically is gratitude by al-arkan, yani by your actions. And hamd, al-thana bil-lisan. And hamd is praising with your tongue, saying alhamdulillah. وهذا المعنى الاصطلاحي in the terminology of the science or discipline we're talking about. So shukr is to show thanks or gratitude by your actions, and alhamd is also to do that, but specifically by your tongue. From another aspect, they also say that shukr is showing gratitude for a specific thing that was done to you. Right? When someone does you a favor, you say ashkurak, thank you. If they get you some tea or coffee and they did a nice thing for you, you say shukran, ashkurak. You don't say ahmaduka, right? Because hamd is specific in the sense, in this connotation, that it is showing gratitude for that which is deserving of gratitude. When we say alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, right, and when you read the translation of this, they say all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But actually the alif lam doesn't mean kull, but in this context, those of you who study a little bit of Arabic language, alif lam huna li-istighraq al-jins. In other words, it means all forms of hamd. Any type of praise ultimately is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He is the source of all favors. He is the source of all bounties. He is the source of all bestowals upon us. So in that sense, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, it's all to Him. And so we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala liwasfihi bil awsaf al jamila. So we pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based upon those beautiful attributes that define Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So not for anything specific of bounty He has given us, but rather because He is worthy of praise, which is a higher form. Right? When you praise something, not based upon what you're getting from it, right? Shukran, you gave me this. There's kind of mu'amala, maslaha, a little bit meaning in that. But when you praise something because it is worthy of being praised, and that is the thing that should be the object of your praise, that's a higher form of gratitude, a higher form of praise. So here, Zarruq, when he's talking about alhamd wa shukr, he means both. Both those meanings. Both those meanings of, or the four that we talked about now. Showing gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the tongue, actually saying it, alhamdulillah, right? And don't belittle the movement of the tongue and speaking these utterances, because they have a direct effect on the heart. And it's actually the first step, right? The best type of dhikr, al-dhikr bil-lisan wal-qalb ma'an. The best type of dhikr is both tongue and heart. And there's a hudur, there's your essence, your soul is saying those things at the same time. But that doesn't belittle the type of dhikr bil lisan faqat, right? And Imam Abdullah secondly talks about, don't belittle or don't leave dhikr because you don't have hudur in your heart. Even if you're just saying with your tongue, that's important. And you won't get to the one with the heart if you don't start doing it with your tongue and training your tongue to say that. And you'll find that most of the tasbih, al-baqiyat al-salihat, which are the well-known adhkar, the 10 that Imam al-Ghazali mentions, and Zarruq mentions a few of them later in this text. Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. The salah on the Prophet ﷺ. All of these, when they run across the tongue, they have an effect and a meaning on the heart. And it's very much similar to the saying of the ulama when they say, لِكُلِّ مَقَامٍ مَقَال. For every particular maqam, there's something to say, a maqal. عند المصيبة, right? You say, إِنَّ لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. That's a type of dhikr called at-tarjih, yani remembering and returning things to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when the calamity happens. When you are in a state of gratitude and shukr and ni'mah, blessings are coming your way, then you say alhamdulillah. You always say alhamdulillah. La ilaha illallah, right, is the best dhikr. Right, as the Prophet ﷺ said, the best dhikr that I have said and the prophets before me, La ilaha illallah. And so La ilaha illallah you can think of as the primordial dhikr, that from which forth all of the others sprout. And it's the first part of the shahada, right? It's the initial thing that we say to show that we have accepted the reality as it is, right? Because when you accept Islam, you're accepting the ultimate and the true reality of things. In other words, you've now looked beyond the zahir, you've now looked beyond just the outward appearances of things, and now you're beginning to see with your heart, with your basira, the inner realities of things. And La ilaha illallah is an inner reality. The outward appearances is going to help you get to that. But if you only stay and you only look to the outward appearances, you won't know La ilaha illallah, really know it. So La ilaha illallah is that initial dhikr. And you see how easy it runs on the tongue, right? It's only a few letters, 3 letters that are repeated, al-lam wal-ha wal-mad al-alif, right? La ilaha illallah. There's no other letters there. And all of them are, except for the ha, they run on the tongue. They're easy to say. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. And when the dhakir becomes starting to go into this dhikr, eventually they get to a point where they don't see anything else, what they call hal al-istighraq. You should continue your dhikr until you reach that point, until there's an actual type of ladha, there's a pleasure in it, and you are sort of mughayyab, you're a little bit not aware of what's going on around you because you're busy with al-madhkur. And madhkur, the one you're remembering, namely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلِكُلِّ مَقَالٍ مَقَامٍ وَلِكُلِّ مَقَالٍ مَقَامٍ. And for every saying, there's a maqam. And this is referring back to what Al-Ghazali was talking about in Ahya, when he said that you will be if you're in a particular state, right, that you're in, then there's a particular thing you're going to say reflecting the inward state. Because dhikr is, you can look at it from those two types of ways. Either I'm saying something to imbibe an inward state, so I say alhamdulillah because I want to feel alhamdulillah inside, or the higher form, I'm living alhamdulillah, and all that I can say is alhamdulillah. I'm already at alhamdulillah, but all that the tongue is doing, it's reflecting my inward state. وَهَذَا حَالِ الْكَامِلِ. This is the one who's already made quite an advance on his or her path. أَمَّا الْمُرِيدَ السَّالِكِ, he will say alhamdulillah and la ilaha wallahu akbar to imbibe those meanings within their heart. But once they become imbibed, then they start saying, coming out by themselves. And then later on, even the heart is always in that state. So even when people are in their mundane affairs, they're always saying this dhikr and it's coming out. I remember one time I lived in Syria a few years, actually a decade ago or more, and I went to this very beautiful dentist, very mutadayyin religious man, and you find a lot of those people in the Muslim world, especially Syria. May Allah relieve its burden now. But you find doctors and physicians and the corner store, and all of them were people of Allah and people of love and beauty, and subhanallah. So I went to the dentist, and he's like open wide. I'm like, and he's like, subhanallah, la ilaha illallah. Like, my God, what is it? Is it gonna have to take out all my teeth? Is it that bad? I mean, I'm a little bit negligent. I haven't been to the dentist quite a bit, but it can't be that bad, right? And then I notice he's doing that with everybody. He's living dhikr. He's in the dentist's office and he's working on your teeth, So I was a little bit relieved, but for a while I thought, wow, I'm really in bad shape with my teeth. So these people, they're living that dhikr, right? I've seen people who prepare the food with dhikr, and when you taste it, it's completely something else. We were, I think, the Rihla in 2007 in Mecca and Medina. We went with Shaykh Hamza to one of the great Syrian ulama, Shaykh Omar, and we sat in his house, and I was really full. I think Sidi Asad was with us and some others. We were all pretty full. We had a big dinner before that. And he puts out this huge spread with, everything imaginable, like lamb and stuffed lamb and all the Syrian dishes, and like, how can I eat this? Shaykh Hamza was like, just eat it. Don't worry, it's shifa. I couldn't stop eating that food, and I was full. I mean, I wanted more. I got up and I was still kind of hungry. I wanted to eat more of it. But there was a sir, there was a secret in that food, la shak. And afterwards they told us the women prepare with ma' zamzam, the food, and they're making dhikr over the food and things like that. And you feel it. Compare that to go eat at your local fast food restaurant. I stopped eating fast food for a while now. But occasionally when I get back into it, I get sick from it. It just makes me sick. And, I have all sorts of stomach problems afterwards, and Allahu A'lam. But, when you think about who's preparing the food for you and under what circumstances, nowadays it used to be like teenagers doing summer work to do that. But now, with the economic state in much of the world, in America especially, people who, had full salary jobs before have to take these type of jobs, and the qahar, the difficult circumstances they're in, and they're not happy with their situation, and that type of unease and anxiety goes into the food, and then you eat that, right? And then it's all corporatized anyway, right? That Burger King or McDonald's hamburger is not really a hamburger. It's not really, how many cows made that thing and what scraps did they pull off the slaughterhouse floor, to put that and that whole, we heard about that pink slime that is supposedly the food that we're eating. That's not food, right? Now we have whole departments dedicated to food science, right? Food science is the study of making food products so that, they feed us with this. Where is the يا أيها الرسل كلوا طيبا وعملوا صالحا? Where's that? Let's eat the thing that is tayyib, that is pure, that is clean. وعملوا صالحا. And notice the connection between the two. العمل الصالح مع أكل الطيب. In other words, it's going to affect your actions, what you're actually, the type of person you're going to be and what you do. No wonder we have all these problems, and we have OCD and ADDH, whatever they call it, and people have all these type of anxieties, and they have to take Ritalin, and they have to take all these meds, and even small children, 12, 13 years of age, less than that, many of them on lots of meds. Something is wrong with the world when that's the case. Since when does a prepubescent child need to be on medication? Because they can't sit, or they can't control themselves, or they can't, properly sit and learn and understand. There's an immense amount of oppression that's going on in the world today, and it's due to our own doing. It's due to our own ahwa, following our own caprice and following, running after putting profit making at a premium, and then the actual well-being of the human being is all the way down on the list. And they only start to think about it when that profit making is put into under threat. When people start getting sick and they want to do class action lawsuits, okay, let's stop selling that product now and make it more healthy and call it something else and so forth. And that's what prompts them. So we mentioned the four aspects of that. That hamd is to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based upon His wasf al-jameel, for that which of the beautiful attributes that are Him, that we know, by which we know Him, Allah Azza wa Jal, right? Because we can't know Allah's essence per se, but we know Him via His attributes and via His manifested attributes in the creation that we see around us. And that's a way of knowing Him. And so even in times of darra, right, times of difficulty, it's actually a way of knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Zarruq, in another treatise, his commentary on Hadith al-Nasiha, he talks about as-sifat al-mu'arrifa, the attributes that make you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if you think about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which include the 99 names but are infinitesimal, right? They're not just those 99. You see that there's two broad categories. There's the attributes of Jamal and the attributes of Jalal. The attributes of Jamal are the attributes of beauty, right? When we think of that, we think of Rahma and Rafa and Lutf, the attributes of gentleness and beauty and mercy and compassion. And then there's the attributes of Jalal, right? Jalal means strength, magnificence, right? هو الجبار, هو القهار, هو المقتدر, هو المنتقم. These are attributes of magnificence and jalal, and they're specific to him. And even when we talk about takhalluq, right, to imbibe some of the divine attributes, the ones of jalal are not for human beings. Right? One of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-mutakabbir. Right? When you say mutakabbir and you're talking about human being, you think arrogant, you think over trying to compel people to do things, and it's not befitting for the human being. And there's even a hadith Qudsi that says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has certain attributes. If you try to use them for yourself, then Allah will destroy you. So those attributes of jabarut, of strength, of magnificence, are not for human beings. But when they do try to assume those attributes, this is when we see fasad, when we see corruption in the earth, and we see calamity, and we see oppression, we see all those things. But the attributes of jamal, of rahmah, and ra'fa, and lutf, and gentleness, right? Karam, he's kareem, then those are ones that one can have takhalluq with, one can imbibe within themselves, right? And then we become people who are rabbaniyin, right? We become divinely inspired people by seeking out those attributes that are befitting for us. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know Him via both of these attributes, both of Jamal and Jalal. And the hikmah, the wisdom behind masa'ib, calamities, is that Allah is letting us know Him via some of His attributes of Jalal, of magnificence, right, of power, of strength. Otherwise we wouldn't know Him. How would we know He's al-Qahhar, right? And Qahhar means something overpowering you, compelling you despite your best efforts. You couldn't overcome it. No matter what you did, it overcame you. That's an attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And that attribute, you won't know it unless you felt that. That subhanAllah, I did everything I could have done, but nevertheless, it didn't come to be. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, huwa al-Qahhar. And these attributes are also more closely related with what Sayyidi Dr. Umar was talking about before, khawf and raja, right? Fear and hope. And that the mu'min is balanced between the two. So if you're all hope and no fear, that's imbalance. And if you're all fear and no hope, that's also imbalance. So it's a balance between the two. So a balance between knowing Him via His sifat al-jamal, the attributes of beauty, and a balance of knowing Him via His sifat al-jalal, the attributes of magnificence. So when the difficult situations arise and adversity arises, it's also a way of knowing, or a way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala letting us know Him. Right? He is making Him known to us. Because the ultimate thing is ma'rifah, to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And even to know Him by dhawq, to know Him by actually unmediated experiential, spiritual experience is the highest form of knowing. Because that's a yaqeen, that's a certainty, and it's not subject to argument or debate or anything like that. It's something, like we said before, mushahada. You actually witness it and you're living it and imbibing it. And no one can convince you otherwise. Hamd and shukr in sarra, in times of ease, in times of bounty, and also in turning to Him in times of affliction. Right? وَاللَّجُوا إِلَيْهِ فِي الضَّرَّةِ. And knowing that there's no sanctuary, that there's no escape, there's no one who could lift your burden except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in those times of affliction. And all of this will go back to the tahqiq al-asl, or the realization of turning to Allah in prosperity and adversity. The next 5 are going back to the 5 we just did, which are the asbab, which is valid interpretation. There's another interpretation that the commentary I have access to, Al-Kharrubi, said that these next 5 go back to everything from the beginning. So it would include also the usul al-khamsa, the first initial 5 principles. And it's close in meaning, but in other words, the next 5 are usul, or principles, in that they are outcomes of embodying the first 5, and then you seek those first 5 by the asbab, by the causes. In other words, the tahaqquq, the realization of those things, by the methods that Sayyidi Zarruq outlines here. And then expected results, or things that come about as a result of those 5, are the next 5. So the first one, ulu al-himma, or exalted aspirations. So himma is something that's very important for the spiritual aspirant, because it's that which gives you the drive to continue and to seek more. And probably a close opposite of himma is malal, or uzuf, maybe is a better word. Uzuf means to sort of like lose your desire, or to sort of not be so much into the thing that you're looking for anymore. You become a little bit exhausted or tired of the thing. And this is quite important for the salik, the spiritual aspirant, to maintain their himma. Because if you lose the himma, then you'll find that things will become doubly difficult for you, and you'll find it very difficult to sort of get back into it. So it's important to pace yourself when you're doing this. And it's important to build consistency, like in your taqwa, the first one he's talking about, then to go on in spurts, right? To sort of have a great himma for a month, or a few weeks, or a few days, and then all of a sudden your himma is gone, and you leave it completely, and that's a disaster. So it's better to be consistent in your ibadah, in your approach, and this is what we mean by moderation, right? To be a moderate Muslim is to be someone who is consistent in their following of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The modern interpretation of moderation, or the one that they want to impose upon us, moderation is like not to be too Muslim. Don't follow the religion too closely. Be moderate. Take other opinions, other philosophical underpinnings into consideration. Don't go too far with your Islam and practice it too much. That's not moderate. And we say to that, no, that's actually extreme, right? Because then you're going to put us in an imbalance, because this is what we are. And when you tell us to do something that's outside of what we are and who we are, then you're pushing us towards extremes. And that's what's happened. So the himma, to maintain the himma, like the Prophet ﷺ said, أحب الأعمال إلى الله عز وجل أدومها وإن قل وكانوا عمله دوما. Right, the best of most beloved of actions to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أدومها, the most consistent, وإن قل, and that's a very important part of this hadith, even if it's small, even if it's little in amount. So it's not about kam, it's not about how much, but rather kayf, how. And to build these good spiritual habits. Zarruq will talk later on about dabt al-awqat bil-awrad, which is to manage your time with awrad, manage your time. And wird, we know, means like litany of spiritual things to say, or adhkar, but wird also means how you spend your time, right? And how you spend your time is the most important thing you have to think about when you're in the dunya, because your capital is your time, right? That's what you're going to be held into accounted for. And when we came into existence, right, because before the existence of the alam, of the universe, there was no such thing as time, right? كان الله ولا شيء معه ولا شيء. There was Allah and nothing. That means there was no time, no place, no nothing. So all of this, min al-adam, all of this from nothingness came about. And that includes our concepts of time and place and passing of time and kada. And so it's intrinsic to our dunyawi lives, the idea of time. And there's a hikmah, there's obviously a secret and a wisdom in how that time became part and parcel of our existence, our own existence. And there's a finiteness to the time that we spend in anything. And obviously an ultimate finiteness of the amount of time we spend on earth in this particular life. Using your time wisely, right, and maintaining sort of a consistent himma and a high, hopefully a high himma, a high aspiration during that time is important. And it is natij, it is something that can be expected by embodying the usul that he's talking about here, namely specifically taqwa and adherence to the sunnah and indifference and to whether one's accept or reject one contentment with Allah and so forth. Because then Allah can bless you with having a high himma. In other words, you continue along the path, you don't stop at a particular place, right? Because that's one of the deficiencies or shortcomings that people they get some type of spiritual opening and they become completely enamored with it, and they sort of think, well, wow, I'm here, I've made it, you know. That particular thing that I wanted to happen, and subhanAllah, just happened exactly like I wanted. That must be a sign that, you know, I'm arrived. Shaitan, he gets into this with you, right? I was talking to some of the brothers outside. Shaitan, he is the smartest of creation. Adka makhluq. So he's not going to go to an insan, al-muttaqi, you know, the one who's praying 5 times a day and who's coming to the Rihla and say, you know, this Islam thing of yours is not right. You know, go do something else. Because he knows that won't work. But he's going to try the things that will work. So for people like yourselves, you might say, oh, mashallah, you guys, you're the cream of the crop. You know, you're like, Shaykh Hamza said, you're using your leisure time and you're not toiling with, you know, the toilings of the dunya, and, you know, you're in this beautiful Tekke and in Istanbul, and how many people in the world are able to be here like us? So you start to think, you know, I am a chosen person. You know, Allah astafani, I am preferred because I've made it to this room, so to speak. That's ujb, right? And ujb means to be pleased with yourself. And they say that that's idda al-udal. It's like the incurable disease almost. You know, it's a very vicious disease of the soul. Because when you start becoming pleased with yourself, then you start thinking, I'm here, I don't have to do anything else. And then you, instead of having contentment with Allah, you have contentment with yourself. And this is exactly the opposite of where you should be going. So shaitan will try to get to you via that. So it's important to maintain that balance, maintain that humility, maintain that tawadu as you go through this. And so if you are blessed enough, Allah will give you a high himmah, a high aspiration. And also you have to work to preserve that himmah. So imbibe the good practices, right, by not overtaxing yourself. You know, and usually a way to do it is, if you want to establish, for example, that you're going to pray the rawatib, you're going to pray the prescribed sunnahs before and after each of the prayers, right? So like in the Fajr or the Subh prayer, there's a 2 rak'ahs beforehand, and then Dhuhr has 2 or 4 before and after, and Asr also has 2 or 4 before only, and Maghrib 2 to 6 after, and then Isha as many, you know, Qiyam al-Layl and so forth after Isha, and you want to establish that in yourself, then, you know, do it in a way where it gets established. Don't try to do all at once if you think it's not going to happen, or it's going to be difficult for you. So if you want to do 4 before Asr, then start off with 2, but do 2 consistently, right? Keep doing it all the time until eventually it will become something where, like, you feel you can't leave it. It's part of who you are now. And then continue with that. You want to pray the night prayer, and you want to be consistent in that, and know that you will not be successful in the night prayer, Qiyam al-Layl, unless Allah selects you for it, right? The hadith, Qiyam al-Layl sharaf al-mu'min. The prayer of the night is the honor of the believer, right? And alaykum bil qiyam al-layl fa innahu kana da'bu as-salihin min qablikum. And you should do the prayer of the night because it was the manner of those of the righteous people before you. So it's an important part of one's, to be part of one's himmah. But it has to be done in a way that you can make it, as we said before, sustainable, right? To make it a sustainable type of ibadah. Don't do so many, don't do 100 rak'ahs and say, I can do this every night. Do 2, and do them in the beginning of the night. You know, make intention for any of the rak'ahs that you pray after Isha to be Qiyam al-Layl. Shaykh Abdullah ibn Abi Jamrah even says, if you go on the opinion that Laylat al-Qadr, the night of power, can happen in any nights of the year, and it's one of the opinions, it's not the only opinion. Other opinions say that it's in Ramadan or it's in the last 10 odd nights, but it is a opinion. What do you lose if you make the intention that every night could be Laylat al-Qadr, could be the night of power, right? Like I think Shaykh Hamza was talking about yesterday, when you err on the side of Rahmah, you don't lose anything if you make the intention every night is Qiyam al-Layl, and then you make, you know, intention that 2 rak'ahs or more. I'm praying, this is Laylat al-Qadr. If it is, then you've gotten khayrun min alf shahr, better than 1,000 nights of worship. And then you go in that with that intention. So do 2, do it for a period of time, maybe a month, maybe 40 days, and then add more as you go on, and try to be as consistent with as you possible to maintain that.